Okay, so good morning, everybody. We are on Masechet Beitzah. We've begun the second parak. Let's start off at Daf Tet Vav Amud Bet at the bottom. This is where we got up to. It's been a while. So you'll see the last line on Daf Tet Vav Amud Bet. It says Tani Rav Tachlifa Achua Deravanai Chuzah over the page. Kol Mizonotav Shel Adam Ktuvim Lo מראש השנה ועד יום הכיפורים, חוץ מהוצאת שבתות והוצאת יום טוב והוצאת בניו לתלמוד תורה. שאם פחת פוחתין לו ומוסיף מוסיפין לו. Okay, so as we said, a person's sustenance, all of a person's income, we made the point, that it relates to a person's income and not to a person's expenses. A person's income is fixed, your expenses are not fixed, you can go over. So, and it's very important to try not to go over. Right, but that's what it says. Here, the Gemara says, we pointed this out as well, it says Rosh Hashanah ad Yom Kippurim. There are other girsot. The girsot of the Bach is it's Rosh Hashanah Vad Rosh Hashanah, right? Meaning that the amount that you have is fixed for the entire year from this Rosh Hashanah until next Rosh Hashanah. According to this girsot, we would have to explain that it means from between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's decided. Meaning it's only fully decided on Yom Kippur when it's sealed exactly how much you'll have, but that is for the entire year. Right? Three exceptions when it comes to the money that you need to spend on Shabbat. What Shabbat? The money you need to spend for Yom Tov, and the money you need to spend on the chinuch of your children, that you can go over. It's good news to know with the tuition crisis and all of that, because these things can get very, very expensive. But says the Gemara that for these mitzvot, a person is allowed to spend extra, and that will be added to him from Shamayim. You spend less on that, you'll have less. Spend more on that, you'll have more. So where do we learn all of this from? That a person's income, the amount you're going to have, is fixed from one year to the next. Where do we see that in the pasuk? Says Rashi, right? What's the pasuk? Shekotzvin mezonot Rosh Hashanah. Where do we see that it's right that your income is going to be fixed on Rosh Hashanah? So it says in the pasuk, "Tik'u b'chodesh shofar b'kesel yom chageinu." It's a famous pasuk. We all remember it well. It's also from the Shir Shel Yom of Thursday. Okay, and this is the pasuk in Tehillim, which alludes to Rosh Hashanah. It does not mention it explicitly. It says, "Tik'u b'chodesh shofar b'kesel yom chageinu." So it says the Gemara, "Ezu chag shachodesh mitkaseh bo." Right? It says b'kesel yom chageinu. Our chag, our festival, which is bekeseh, in other words, which is hidden. So which is the tikuba chodesh shofar? The fact that it says chodesh is the month, which relates to the moon. Which is the chag where the moon is hidden, so to speak? Right? Which is the chag where the moon is hidden? Hevei Amez Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so that's the first stage of the limud. That it's referring to Rosh Hashanah. From the fact that you might have thought from the fact that it says shofar, I already know. It says the Gemara from the fact that it says the fact that you have the month which is hidden, that has to be Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is the only chag we have that is at the beginning of the month, where the moon can't really be seen. And then it says, around the next pasuk, it says, Uchtiv, ki chok l'Yisrael hu mishpat le'Elokei Yaakov. So what does that mean? So the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah in a different place learns out from here the remez of the fact that we are judged on Rosh Hashanah. It's also a very strange thing. We think of Rosh Hashanah as Yom Adin. If you were to ask anybody, right, what is the essence of the Chag of Rosh Hashanah? So they'll tell you Shofar, they'll tell you Yom Adin, they'll tell you today we are judged. That does not appear anywhere in Chumash. It doesn't appear anywhere explicitly, right? So that's a very interesting question as well, why that is and why that is hidden also. But in any event, so it says here, Ki chok l'Yisrael hu, and we're learning out that the word chok relates to mezonot, relates to the sustenance, the income that you're going to have for the year. How do we know that? Says the Gemara, from where do you see that the word chok means a law, right? Where does it mean anything related to food, relating to mezonot, relating to sustenance? So the Gemara gives two answers. First of all, this is from Sefer Bereshit. Where it talks about the Kohanim of Mitzrayim, that they had a fixed portion. Chok also means a law, but also means a fixed portion. It means a fixed portion of bread, a fixed portion of food, and they would receive every day from Paro. That's where we see the word chok relating to food. That's one place. And there's another place in the Pasuk which says, there's the Pasuk in Mishlei, right? So either one of those two places, we understand that the word chok is related to mizonot, and therefore our pasuk which says which is the chag, which is related to keser, which is the time when the month is hidden, as Rashi explains, that is Rosh Hashanah. And on Rosh Hashanah, we see that it's right to ki chok l'Yisrael. We understand chok meaning the fixed amount of food that you're going to have throughout the year. Let's see Rashi for a moment. Rashi says, if you go back a few lines, he says, "Shachodesh mitkasebo, shalevana mitkasabo." Right, that the moon is hidden. She'ena nired lekol adam. Not everybody can see it. Ela shacharit le'shem mizrach, v'arvit le'shem ma'arav, kedama b'roshana. Okay, without going into all the astronomical nuances, but essentially there's a certain time in the morning, a certain time in the evening that it can be seen in certain places. But that is, again, it's Rosh Hashanah. It's a tiny slither of the moon. It's the new moon. The rest of the time you can't see it. Okay, so Heve Hamer Rosh Hashanah. Ilu Sha'al Yom Tov Kfanit Mal'a Levana b'miktzat. Other Yomim Tovim, which are later in the month, the moon is already filled up and you can see it. You can see it everywhere. Bekesel Yom Chagenu, Abechodesh Kai, Tik'u, Bechidush Alvana. In other words, Tik'u Bechodesh Shofar means Bechidush, right? When it's the new moon. Shofar Kshu Mitkaseb Yom Chagenu, when it's hidden on the stage. Okay, so that is the way that Rashi explained that. Just have a look at Tosfot for a moment, because it's interesting. Tosfot over here brings a very different interpretation to what does it mean, and there may be actually a practical nafkamina ramification in terms of what it means that the month is, or the moon is hidden. So Chag Chodesh Mitkasebo. So Tosfot Rashi Shalvana Inani Leit says that you can't see the moon. V'kashe leperush zeh davar le'lemeima shalvana mitkasa. I mean, the moon is not covered. Rashi explained when it says bekesser, the word kesser means lachasot, is to cover something up. So Rashi says it means that the moon cannot be seen, but really it should be that it's covered up. It's not covered up, and therefore you skip a couple of lines in Tosfot. He says just afterwards, it says Mishlei Zayin. He says Rabbeinu Meshulam Piresh. Therefore, one of the Baletos for Rabbeinu Meshulam gives the following explanation: Mitkaseh shelo haya sa'ir shel Rosh Chodesh karev bo. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit explosive. Rabbeinu Meshulam says, what does it mean mitkaseh? Mitkaseh means that it's covered up, or what's covered up? That the sa'ir shel Rosh Chodesh, the Korban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, is not going to be brought. Rosh Hashanah is also Rosh Chodesh, right? We don't have excuse me, as I'm sure you all remember, we don't have Shabbat Mavarchim. We only do Mavarchim HaChodesh for 11 of the 12 months. There is no Mavarchim HaChodesh for Tishrei, right? The reason for that is we have to have Mavarchim HaChodesh in order to remind people. Everybody knows when Rosh Chodesh is. Everybody knows when Rosh Hashanah is, right? So even now they're booking their seats. Okay, so hopefully, so that's Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah is also Rosh Chodesh, but Rosh Chodesh plays a very secondary role. So Rabbeinu Meshulam says, to the extent that we don't have the Korban of Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah. So now this is quite controversial. Let's see. V'hikshar Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam finds this difficult to accept. The B'tosefta Kamad Kashiv Lamed Bet Seilim B'Shana. וכך חשיב י"ב צעירים דורשי חודשים, ולא מצינו י"ב אם לא היה סעיר דורש חודש. דורש השנה. Rabbeinu Tam says, Rabbeinu Meshulam, כל הכבוד, what are you talking about? He says, we find in the Tosefta that lists all the korbanot throughout the year, and all the korbanot are of Rosh Chodesh. It says that there are 12 se'irim of Rosh Chodesh. Okay, it's not talking about a leap year. So if you're going to take out the Korban of Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah, you're not going to have enough. So it can't be that there is no Seir of Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah. So Veshiv Rabbeinu Meshulam, the lo ala ali bola marken. So Rabbeinu Meshulam answered. He says, "Don't worry, I never thought that. I never would have suggested you don't actually bring the Korban." So what was he saying? Elaita da'ato דלא מפרש קרא בהדיא של ראש חודש לראש השנה. Didn't mean to say that the korban doesn't actually exist. It meant to say you don't find it in the pasuk. The Torah doesn't say, it doesn't specify the korban of Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah. Dichtiv Pinchas, right? We just read it. Dichtiv Pinchas milvad olat hachodesh v'chatat lo yizkir. It says all the going through all the chagim and Shabbat, etc. And it says all the korbanot. So Rosh Hashanah, it says all of the specific korbanot of Rosh Hashanah, and it says alongside milvad olat hachodesh, the olah of Rosh Chodesh. What about the chatat? It's not mentioned. So therefore, that's what Rabbeinu Moshe meant. He meant it's hidden, it's covered up, so to speak. What is hidden? Not the moon, not that it's at the beginning of the month, but the fact that it's Rosh Chodesh is hidden in the Torah's description of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, what's going to be the nafkamina? Nafkamina is going to be, what do we say in Tefillah? When we daven Musaf on Rosh Hashanah, do we mention the Korban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh? There are those who say that the point is that you don't mention it in your Tefillah. Rabbeinu Tam Adrabah. Rabbeinu Tam says no, since it's brought, you have to mention it. V'tiken Rabbeinu Tam lomar b'musaf milvad olat hachodesh, etc. So Rabbeinu Tam would say, you would say milvad olat hachodesh, and you would actually mention that there. V'chen tiken lomar shnei silim gilchatam v'sil echad shel Rosh Chodesh v'sil echad shel Rosh Hashanah. So that was Rabbeinu Tam's nusach, but you would actually mention it. Today, we don't do this. We don't mention the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh specifically, but what we do is that we say in our Shmoneh Esrei, which I shouldn't call Shmoneh Esrei, but we all do. But in Yamidah of Rosh Hashanah, we say Musfei Yom Hazeh. We say Musfei in the plural, and that relates to both the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh and the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so that was just an interesting machloket there between Rashi and Tosfot. What precisely does it mean? That it's hidden. Are we relating to the moon itself? Are we related to the fact of the korban of Rosh Chodesh? Whether we bring, everybody agrees at the end of the day that we do bring the korban musaf of Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah. Question is how we mention that and how we allude to that in our tefillot. Okay, so now let's go back into the Gemara. Interesting discussion now relating to Oneg Shabbat, relating to the preparation for Shabbat. This may be well known to some of you. Says the Gemara as follows. We are about, a third of the way down. Maybe halfway down the narrow lines. Tanya. Amru alav al Shammai azaken, kol yamav hayaochel lichvod Shabbat. So they would say about Shammai that he would always eat in honor of Shabbat. What does that mean? Matzah be'ema na'a omer zol Shabbat. Matzah acheret na'a imeno maniach tashniya v'ochel rishona. Right, so it happened to be, it's not like today. Today you go into the shops and you can get whatever you want, whenever you want. Okay, but sometimes it's not so easy. Sometimes you go to your butcher in the shuk or wherever it is. So you have a nice piece of sardo today. He says, no, today I don't have. Okay, so Shammai would go, and it would happen that he would get he would mizdamen lo. He would have a nice piece of meat, a nice delicacy piece of food. He would leave it aside for Shabbat, right? So it says, that's why he was all the time, throughout the week, he was living with this Shabbat consciousness. Shabbat. You find a nice piece of meat, you find a nice animal, you'd say, I'll keep this aside for Shabbat. Then what happens? The next day, he's got that waiting in the freezer. The next day, he finds a better one. He says, okay, I'll eat the first one now, and this one I'll keep for Shabbat. Okay, that was the midah of Shammai. Aval Hillel HaZaken midah acheret hayta lo. Hillel HaZaken, on the other hand, he had a slightly different approach. Shekol ma'asav l'shem shamayim. Everything he did was l'shem shamayim. So what does that mean? Shneimah Baruch Hashem yom yom. You have to give thanks. You have to give praise to Hashem every day. So what is that? What exactly does that mean? I think Rashi here says. Right, so Rashi says Ochelet Harishona. That's relating to Shammai. It says Nimtza Ochla lezo Meaning, he found a nicer one, so then he would eat the first one, in order that the nice one would be kept for Shabbat. L'shem shamayim, that's Hillel, says, Botech shtiztamenu na'al Shabbat. Hillel would trust that, today's Monday, Makasher Shabbos. So today I've got a very, very nice delicacy that's come my way. I'll eat it today, Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. And I'll have emunah, faith that when I go do the shopping on Thursday night or on Friday morning, that they'll still have something and there'll be something very, very nice for Shabbat. Just as Hashem has provided for me now, He'll provide for me then. Right? He wasn't honoring Shabbat any less, but it's a different attitude, it's a different approach to emunah. Gemara continues, says, Tanya namihachi, Beit Shammai omrim mechad shavecha l'shivtecha, Beit Hillel omrim Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Right? In other words, Beit Shammai says, from the first day of the week, you start praying for Shabbat, and Hillel says, no, every day in and of itself. So I just want to share with you the Mishnah Berurah over here. If you have it in front of you, you can open up. Otherwise, I'll read it to you. It's in Siman Reish Nun. Siman Reish Nun, which is near the beginning of Hilchot Shabbat, Shulchan Aruch talks about the Hachanot L'Seudot Shabbat. And over there, the Shulchan Aruch says, Yashkim baboker, bayom shishi lachin tzorchei Shabbat. Person should wake up early on Friday morning in order to prepare for Shabbat. Well, you have to do that, because if you wake up late, you're going to come to the shops and everything's going to be, they're not going to have anything left. And we've spoken about this once before. Spoken about the concept that even if a person needs to, a person could go before davening. Normally, we don't engage in our own needs before davening. We're not meant to, at least. But a person could even go before davening to get the tzorchei Shabbat if that's required. Okay, and the Shulchan Aruch goes on. He says, even if you've got servants, you've got staff who can do it for you, nonetheless, even if you're a very important person, right, you should still go. You should get something, do something in honor of Shabbat. And we know the stories of the Tanaim and the Amoraim that the Gemara tells us, who would chop the wood and do all sorts of things. And Shabbat. I heard once that Rav Nevensal, the Rav of the old city, maybe he still does, but he would go every Friday morning. He would go to the Makolet to buy the chalot for Shabbat himself. That's what he would do, Lichvod Shabbat. Okay, so the Mishnah Berurah says like this. He says, so first of all, he writes as follows. If you've got it in front of you, it's Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Bet, towards the middle, but he says, Tov Shema Kol Davar Shekoneh Zeh Lichvod Shabbat. The person goes and buys something, right, in honor of Shabbat, you should say, Zeh Lichvod Shabbat. It's good to say. Ki adibur poel harbe b'kedusha. Ve'af al pi shechin b'hashkama, mitzvah lechatchila shosef kam ben hashmashot. Okay, even though you started preparing in the morning, you should prepare later in the day as well. Beseder. And then he says like this, Tashu Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai said that you should remember from the first day of the week. Right. This is, by the way, this is why we in Shir Shal Yom, right? Yom Yom Rishon LeShabbat, Yom Sheni LeShabbat. That is a fulfillment of the mitzvah of Zachoret Yom Shabbat LeKodsho. We remember Shabbat throughout the week. So Beit Shammai says this is the way you should remember Shabbat throughout the week. Nizdamen lecha chelek yafeh. You get a good portion. Shabbat. You should set it aside for Shabbat. That all of his days he would eat in honor of Shabbat. That's exactly the Gemara that we just saw. All the time he's eating, but whatever he's eating during the week, he's doing in order to set aside for Shabbat. Hillel, as we said, has a different measure. Hashem will provide for us each and every day. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Says the Mishnah Berurah. He says, many poskim agree. Shegam Hillel modeh shekedivrei Beit Shammai adif atfei. That even Hillel agrees that the practice of Beit Shammai, that is the derech hamelech, that is the proper approach for most people. You get something nice, you set it aside, you leave it for Shabbat. However, Ela shaya botech b'Hashem shebevadai yazmin lo leShabbat mana yafa mishar yamim. But Hillel himself, he was on the level of emunah that he was certain that Hashem would provide something for him for Shabbat. And he would act in this way in order to strengthen his own midah of bitachon. אבל בשאר כל אדם שאין ביטחונו חזק כל כך, okay, very interesting. For other people, from ordinary people, you're not Hillel Azaken, okay? You have, and again, so your level of bitachon is not what Hillel's was. It's not a flaw. I don't say there's something wrong with you. That's ordinary. Gamu moded kshamay adifat tvei. So in such a case, Hillel would also agree that you should act, that for most people, you should act the way that Shammai did. Right? He doesn't expect you to rely on the nes, so to speak. The Mishnah Berurah adds on another point, which is important and which is relevant for practical halacha. He says, "Upshita." He says it's obvious that b'davar she'eno shachech liknot, something which is very, very rare, it's very uncommon, right? You go to the shops every week and they never have, I don't know, whatever it is, and you go in 1 week, they have it. Okay, then, according to everybody, you can set that aside for Shabbat. Something which is uncommon, you got it. You should set it aside and leave it as the delicacy. Okay, we'll stop there today. I know it's a few minutes early, but excuse me. We'll end the show there for today, and I hope everybody has a good day. And we will see you again for tomorrow for our final share before the summer break.
Amen.